Welcome to Taking Care of Business on Koerner Radio, News Talk 1180 for the best in Saturday Talk Radio at 1 o'clock, and on 1230 KGEO at 10 o'clock, and for the best in Wednesday Talk Radio on 1410 KERI, Wednesdays at 1 o'clock. Your host is Clay Koerner, and I'm Marty Pay, and behind the big board is Greg Held, our producer. Had a fantastic show last week with Pedro Rios running for the 32nd Assembly District and Mick Gleason, who's running for first supervisorial candidate here in Kern County. And we actually support both of them, like them both. I like Mick a lot. He's an ex-base commander at China Lake, and we had an interesting conversation with him about Benghazi. He has a interesting perspective, being not only a commander of a major base, but also a fighter pilot in Iraq. So I loved his perspective on it. But today we've got a fantastic show. We're a week away from the election, less than a week. In the second half, we have Dr. Waleed Faris, who we've had on before, who is a Fox commentator, a Middle East expert, also an author, but he's also now the senior advisor on foreign policy and national security for presidential candidate and hopefully President Mitt Romney. But in the first half, we have an old friend of the show we've had on twice before, Erik Rush, who's an author and the man who broke the story about Reverend Wright so many years ago. Erik, welcome to Taking Care of Business.
Hi, thanks for having me on. How are you?
It's always a pleasure to have you on, and I enjoy looking at you on Facebook and reading your posts and things. And you know, one of the things I want to touch in the time we have today is your book, because the last two times we've had you on, we've just run out of time. We've got into other subjects, and there's so much going on in the news. But I do want to talk about your book a little bit.
Okay, certainly. My last book, Negrophilia, From Slave Block to Pedestal, America's Racial Obsession, it was essentially my effort toward giving people the freedom or the license to speak out on issues of race, mostly conservative people. There are a lot of conservatives who have been intimidated into not speaking about race, both white and otherwise. Black conservatives definitely fall into that group. And it pretty much documents, in a nutshell, race politics from the Civil War up through up through the present. Of course, it doesn't have everything, or it would be in several volumes, like an encyclopedia. But it served its purpose, I think, in that a lot of people, the reaction of a lot of people was that across the board, they were like, "Oh, thank you for writing this. I thought I was the only one who felt this way," which didn't surprise me. But I really think that it went a fair bit towards letting people know that they could get engaged on that level, regardless of the invective that people would throw at them as a result.
So what you're thinking is, if say, a white conservative would get involved in that discussion, he's all of a sudden automatically racist? Is that the insinuation?
Yeah, absolutely. And that black conservatives, of course, are called all sorts of, disgusting things when they reveal themselves as conservatives. And in addition to enlightening folks as to the kinds of things, the way that the political left exploits blacks and has for a long, long time, to give people license to get into that discussion and say, if they're going to call you, if all they're going to do is call you names, that really, you could have bigger problems than that. The people during the civil rights movement who were fighting for racial equality, they suffered a whole lot more than that.
It's interesting, Erik. I spent a lot of my life in Los Angeles, and I have a lot of friends of mine in South L.A., and a couple of friends of mine, they hear you on the show. We have some interesting conversations afterwards.
Yeah, I'm quite sure.
Because they're about as liberal as you and I are conservative, so it's... I remember it's kind of that deer in the headlight look, like, well, he doesn't understand. Well, yeah, of course he understands. He understands very well, and that's part of the problem, is that you do understand.
Yeah, well, I get that a lot. Definitely get that a lot.
Mm-hmm. So how does your book play into the election and into, one of the things I've heard is that a lot of people voted for Obama last time around. A lot of white people voted for Obama last time around because they didn't want to have the perception of being racist. But now those same people are switching because of his policies.
Well, absolutely. I think that there was a certain amount of novelty in having our first black president, and to a certain extent, while one might think it's kind of shallow, I can understand it. However, having seen how dismal and dangerous Obama's policies are and where they've brought us to, of course, people have a dog in the fight now in that their economic situation, personally, in some cases, and in the aggregate in terms of us as a nation, has really suffered, and people want to turn that around, and, they're not... people aren't fools as much as liberals like to think that the American electorate are fools, and they're only going to take that novelty so far.
Mm-hmm. We're having a conversation with Erik Rush, author, commentator, and the man who broke the Reverend Wright story. It's one of the interesting things, Erik, about having this show with Clay is that Clay usually takes a nap partway through the show, and he's awake.
I'm back.
Awesome.
He takes his 5-minute nap, and you never know when in the show it's going to happen.
Well, whenever we talk about Obama, I sort of get sick and fall asleep.
Yeah, well, I can identify with that one.
Well, where can people get your book?
You can get my book at Amazon.com or at WorldNet Daily or my website. That would be erikrush.com, ERIKRUSH.com. And, the response has been really good. Actually, there's sort of been a spike in interest in it among people with the election getting closer, and people have seen the kinds of really shrill race-baiting rhetoric that's been going on, not necessarily by the campaign, but by Obama supporters and surrogates. Chris Matthews jumps to mind, of course. And so people have sort of taken... I guess they're taking the onus of investigating these things a little bit more, which is good. And so I've had people asking me a lot about my book, average readers and, across the board. And so that'll be good because it will serve to inform them more about what's been going on with how the left exploits black Americans. And in the beginning, I do talk about Obama and how his election came about.
What's interesting, I heard something early. This is Clay. I heard something interesting today that when Obama needed help to take out bin Laden, he called on the SEALs. But when the SEALs needed help in Benghazi, Obama wasn't there.
That's interesting that you mentioned that because moments ago I was reading an article on how Facebook had taken down some of the SEALs postings about that very subject. And, people are now all up in arms about Facebook, not giving them equal time and censoring them and things of that nature. And of course, it's those people who are familiar with these things like we are know that leftist leaders, essentially view the military as idiots, bulldogs, pawns to be used. And they've obviously have taken they've taken a back seat in terms of priorities and deference where this administration goes.
When we come back from the break, I want to talk to you a little bit about Reverend Wright and how you think that teaching might fit into something like the way Obama apparently handled the Benghazi affair, because there's obviously a disdain there for the military. And I think that my own guess is that comes from not being not having a positive outlook on America and the military, and even though Wright himself was a Marine at one time, but very disgruntled, obviously. But
yeah.
let's go there when we come back from the break. We'll be back in a moment on Taking Care of Business on Koerner Radio News Talk 1180.